Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Insider, brought to you, as ever, by Vanishing Inc. My guest today co-owns Vanishing Inc., so put it into my contract that for every season of The Insider he had to appear every single time. So due to contractual obligations, here he is, Mr. Joshua J. Josh, how are you this morning?
Contract fulfilled. Hi, Damien. Good to be here.
Lovely to see you. What are you up to?
I am just on a full day of press for my book. So this is coming at a great time because I have been talking all day and will continue talking all day about my book and stuff for it. But let me just take this opportunity to grab the microphone on The Insider and say you do such a good job. I mean that. It's such a weird treat to listen to our podcast on my own time, and you're a great host, and so I appreciate all you do, and I know the listeners appreciate you too.
Oh, thank you. That was very kind of you to say. As well as the book press stuff, which we'll get onto momentarily, there's a bit of prep for a small convention that you're organising next week. How's that going?
Small being the key word this year. Yes. There's so much going on. I just got back from Europe. I am getting ready for an appearance. I am getting ready for Magifest and this book tour and so many other things. But yes, Magifest is happening September 16th to the 18th. I imagine most of our listeners know that. We made the very difficult, but I think the correct decision to limit attendance significantly. So instead of, between 1,000 and 1,100 people, we will have a little less than 500, and that's all in. And we have a requirement to show proof of vaccine. Mm-hmm. And, it's going to be great. We're sort of leaning into the limitations that we have as big advantages. Like, this is the year to come to Magifest if you want an intimate experience convention. Like, this is the time when you're going to have a really easy time meeting and interacting with our huge array of talent, and you're going to have really good seats, and the visibility is going to be great, and the dealer room is going to have enough of everything for once, and it's going to be really good in those ways. I, of course, miss and lament the loss of the normal times, but it is what it is.
Yeah, no, it does bring advantages, because sometimes, obviously, the sessioning at Magifest is second to none, but when you see that cool table, with the guy that you want to, or lady that you want to meet, sat there holding court, and you just can't get close. This year, you've got more of a chance to actually meet your heroes, haven't you?
That is exactly it. And I think that the sessioning in some ways will be better because it's a more intimate crowd and everybody will just kind of vibe together a little more. It's not going to feel so intimidating and so off-putting when so many people are in one place. So, yeah, we're really excited about it. I can tell you that, in our ad copy, we've been saying it's what we all need. It's what we all need. But I feel like it's what I need too. It's what truly we all need, which is a little bit of togetherness at this time.
Yeah. What safety measures have you, apart from obviously what must have been a difficult decision to require the proof of vaccination, what other safety measures have you put in place for people?
Yeah, so there's attending? A few things that we can go over. One of the things is, because this is September and not January, we actually can be outside. And there's a really great area outside for people to hang out in and session in if they like. There are less chairs around each of the session tables in the dealer's room. Because we have this extra space, it means that we can space people out in the ballroom so that they're not sitting right next to and on top of other people as in previous years. So there's going to be that. There's more space in the dealer's room, so there's way more ability to move around without feeling like you're next to anybody at all. So those are just a few of the things. And then, of course, the fact that everybody there will have been vaccinated greatly reduces the spread of any potential virus. There's also the hotels doing lots of things like hourly cleanings of the bathrooms and the guardrails and public areas, so sanitation stations, lots of things.
And have that, because of the changes in the numbers of attendees and all of that sort of stuff, has there been, and the whole safety aspect, have you had to make changes to the way the gala shows are operating as well?
A little bit, yeah. But I think that the question you're sort of getting at that a lot of people want to know is, the answer is no. We have not dwindled down the convention at all because of the loss of revenue or because of the loss of attendees. Like, In retrospect, I wish we knew 2 years ago that this convention would be 500 people, because we hired the number of talent and events for a 1,000-person convention, and that's made it, difficult from a business standpoint. But the great benefit that the people who come are going to experience is you're getting serious bang for your buck, because this convention was initially planned to be, in a post-pandemic world, and we're just not quite there yet. But yes, we've changed the strategy of some of the things that we're doing, and the layout of the backstage area, and the way that we're interacting with tech. But the shows and the lectures and the panels are all going to feel very much of the same quality and exceeding the quality of previous years.
And you'll be able to see more easily. Tell us about the special lectures on the Sunday, the workshops on the Sunday.
Nate Staniforth and John Armstrong. So these are two magicians that I have such respect for. Nate Staniforth is somebody who I've never seen in person. I've followed his work. His book, Clouds and Kingdom, is a great favorite. And he's a soft-spoken guy, and he has really a great theory of magic. He's a strong writer. And I'm just really excited to spend that 3 hours with him in this workshop. We do workshops every Sunday. They're extra pay events, and we really limit attendance. And so it's like taking a private lesson from somebody. And then the other one is John Armstrong, who, of course, made this great transition that we all saw from a really renowned close-up magician to become a really great parlor magician. And so he works cruise ships and big events now, and he's on stage. And I think his workshop is going to focus on parlor magic, which is just really exciting to me.
Super exciting. Magifest aside, you did mention it at the beginning, but there's this little book thing you've got going on. Tell us about the book. What's going on there?
Oh, Damien, I'm so excited about this book, and it's surreal to me that I can talk about it now, because for the longest time it was shrouded in secrecy, and then it got pushed back 3 different times because of COVID and everything else. So the fact that I can just talk about it now is such a cathartic thing. But yes, I have a book. It's called How Magicians Think: Misdirection, Deception, and Why Magic Matters. And this was the book I feel like I was born to write. This is the book I've always wanted to write. I'm sure I will write books later, and I will be excited about them, but there is no conceivable way that I will be as excited as anything that I am about this book. I mean, this book really I've been living with it so long, and it was not an easy book to sell. It's coming out not through Vanishing Ink, but through a major publisher, Workman Publishing. Was not an easy book to sell. And so for the longest time that I was writing and thinking about and pre-writing and outlining, I didn't know if the book would ever find a home.
Right.
But I'm so glad it did. I'm so proud of how it came out, and I'm so excited for all of you to get your hands on one.
And during that outlining and preparation stage, tell us how that happens. Have you got a literary agent that goes out and pitches it to you? So what do you give them to give to the publishing companies?
Right. So before that, it starts with like, how does this kernel of an idea come about? And basically, I'd been gestating with an idea that I wanted to write a serious book on magic for the public. I wanted to write a book that lets us peer behind the curtain at what makes magicians tick. And then I read a couple of books that really changed the trajectory for me. One is How Music Works by David Byrne, a musician. And this is like his love letter to music. It's really great because it's not for music lovers. It's not for musicians. It's for anybody. And it's a book that's kind of his testimony to what he loves about music. And it's how he made records. It's the things he loved about touring. It's how he wrote his biggest hit songs. It's his failures. It's his favorite musicians. It's a little bit of everything. It's like a hard book to describe. And I wanted to write How Music Works for magic. That's what I wanted to do. And that helped me crystallize my idea. The other book was a book called 7 Days in the Art World. And once again, I'm not an artist. I'm not an art dealer. I'm not an art auctioneer. But this book gives you 7 metaphorical days in the art world. So I know that the artist or the author spent months and months and months researching and scouting out things for the book. But it's a metaphorical 7 days. The first day is at an art auctioneering house. So you find out how the meat grinder of art auctions. And then the next day is in an artist's studio. She goes to Jeff Koons' studio and all these, Damien Hirst's studio. And another day is a museum curator's day in the life of. So by the end of this book, you have a really good sense of how the art world works. And again, I don't know much about the art world, but I'm fascinated by any craft done at a big level, at a great high level. And so this book is my attempt to get us there with magic.
So you say it's a peek behind the curtain, but I assume that you're not getting into the realms of secrets and exposure.
Yeah, that's right. Nothing is really exposed in terms of tricks. I mean, I speak frankly, and I don't shy away from method and some things that the reader needs to know about, but it's all in the service of gaining a deep appreciation for magic. Damien, when I went to write this book, when I finally did sell it, I went to my friend Joe Posnanski, who's had several books on the Times bestseller list, and he's just a beautiful writer. He's a sports writer typically. And I said, "What's your advice? I mean, I'm just feeling overwhelmed. I could see myself spending 5 years writing in circles." And he said, "Here's what you do. Figure out what your core thesis is, your premise of your book. One sentence, and write that sentence on a piece of paper. And then tape it to your monitor so that every step of the process, when you're overwriting, when you're underwriting, when you've got writer's block, when it's all flowing beautifully, when you're doing interviews, you are staring at every sentence you write at that core premise." And my core premise was, I want to deepen people's appreciation for magic and magicians. That's it. That's what I want to do. I want to deepen people's appreciation for magic and magicians. And I think of it this way. Damien, if you and I didn't know each other and we just went to dinner, we could hear Elton John, Tiny Dancer playing on the radio, and we could have a great argument about what era was Elton John's best, if this is his best song, what his best work was.
Yep.
Then when we're done with that, we could look down at our pasta and we could argue about what makes for great pasta and where was the best pasta we ever had. And when we're done with that, we could talk about the best Star Wars films and the worst Star Wars films and what made each one why. In other words, neither of us make our livings in the culinary arts or music or films, but we all have fluency in those areas. We can all recognize the difference. We may not all agree, but we all recognize objectively what makes for great music, art, film, food. I contend that lay people cannot discern the difference between great magic and bad magic. And it's not because they don't possess the skills. It's because they don't possess the experience. They don't possess the effort, the background to do it. And I would secondarily contend that not many magicians possess the magical fluency to talk critically. I think a lot of magicians have great instincts. If you've been performing your whole life, you can sort of go, "Oh, that's a great opener." Why is it a great opener? Well, I don't know. It's hard to explain. And, I've interviewed, and I know you have too, so many great magicians, and some are very reflective, but most are not. And most who have achieved greatness have achieved it in an intuitive way that they can't even themselves articulate. And that's a problem. It's not a problem for them personally. If you're a great magician and you can't explain why you're great, that's fine. But it's a problem as a community, because if we can't differentiate what makes great magic great, if we can't talk about what makes a structure of a magic trick really compelling versus really like a puzzle, then we are doomed to repeat the same failures and not be able to pass that knowledge on.
Yeah. It's impossible to improve without that.
Yeah.
The other thing I think that we have in terms of Elton John and the pasta and whatever else, pasta, I can translate for you, is vocabulary. That we're not cooks and we're not musicians and yada, 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 but we can still, there are words that we know. We can talk about BPM, or we could talk about chord structure, or we could talk about
exactly
how much sauce there's on the pasta and how al dente it is, etc., etc. But we can't, normal people can't do that for magic, can they?
That's right. They don't have the vocabulary. But even if they didn't have the vocabulary, there's just not the understanding among most lay people that magic and magicians aren't all one and the same. It's the old cliche that lots of magicians bring up, but it's true. If somebody goes to a bad concert, they don't say, God, I hate musicians. They just say, I didn't care for Kelly Clarkson this time, But if you go to a bad magic show, it's completely common for people to say, I hate magicians. God, I hate magic shows. And I hope that in some small way, this book, How Magicians Think, is going to play a role for the people who read it in saying, you know what? Not all magicians are cut from the same cloth. There is process behind a magic show. There is great depth and decision-making and artistry that goes into all these decisions, and I'm going to be more sensitive to that as I watch the next magician.
For the book, you shadowed some incredible people, Teller, Blaine and Copperfield. What was that experience like? And what were you actually doing? Explain what you mean when you say you shadowed them.
Yeah, I mean, it was different in all cases, and then COVID played a role, toward the end. The last edition was David Blaine, and that was already in COVID times, so that, unfortunately, was by phone. But in the case of David Blaine, I've spent a lot of time with him. He's from New York, I'm in New York, spent time at his office, I've worked with his team on things. So, I bring some experience to bear there, and then I had 3 or 4 intense conversations. So to break them down, I spent time with Teller, spent time with Copperfield, and with Blaine. With Blaine, all 3, by the way, remarkable people. Each one, I'm very proud of those 3 chapters because I do think I captured the true essence of those people, not just the playing into their stereotypes. I hope I demystify David Blaine in a way. But he's a tough one to demystify because he's the most mythic of all of them, because he is that guy. Yeah. It's not to say he doesn't play a role when he's doing magic, that he doesn't have a character, but he really is an unusual fellow. And so when you're talking with him, he really is that guy. And so he does say things that are just so wild and crazy that I have to shake my head and go, whoa, explain what you mean. Do you really mean that you would do that? Yes, I really mean I would do that. And so you'll read some things in the David Blaine section that I think will truly shock you. And one of the things that I love is that he did not tell me that in the pandemic he was planning on this this balloon special that he did with YouTube, where he jumped from a set of balloons and then dived to safety with some skydiving and a parachute. So the whole time we're doing this interview, he's talking to me, and then the last time we talked, he went, all right, it's great talking with you. Thanks for doing these interviews. I got to go jump out of a plane now. And that's how I ended the piece, because it's true. But my editor and so many readers were like, I mean, come on, that's stranger than fiction. That's not true. And I'm like, it is true. He was doing these interviews as he was training, and that's the real truth. Teller is my favorite magician in the world to talk to, because Teller, maybe it's because he's interested in the same things that I am in magic, and he really cares deeply. I mean, this core promise of the book to deepen people's appreciation for magic, I kind of feel like is Penn and Teller's core promise to their audience. So what's great about Teller is I can be on the phone with him for 30 seconds. He's not a guy who likes pleasantries. It's not a what you up to, where are you traveling from. I mean, it's 30 seconds and we are talking about serious magic stuff. And yeah, we chatted for at length on 2 occasions, and he broke down for me several of my favorite Penn and Teller pieces, which are not the typical Penn and Teller pieces that you think about. And one's Cowboy Rodeo, and one's the Vanishing Elephant, and so there's some really weird Penn and Teller pieces that we talk about at length. And he gives you the backstage view of how they develop these pieces, and more importantly, he gives a very candid approach on how he collaborates with Penn. And there was a very touching moment that brought him to tears. I mean, it was really powerful and electric to be in the room at that moment. But, there are these rumors around, and they're really harmful rumors I see now, that, I'd always heard, Penn and Teller aren't friends. They just work together, but they're not friends. I had heard that a million times, and I asked him about it. And he had a really loving, wonderful response, which you'll have to read in the book. But he dispels that notion completely, and he kind of puts it into the perfect metaphor of what Penn is to him, which is really unique, because I don't think most journalists have the guts to ask that question.
I'm sure. No, I've never seen it.
And then Copperfield, was just such a pleasure. I mean, this is my childhood idol. He's in a class by himself, and Andy was actually present for the interview with Copperfield, and Copperfield conducted it on his private jet. So we were
Baller.
in Copperfield's jet. I'm asking him all these questions, and I got to ask him the question I think everybody's afraid to ask him, but has such an interesting answer, which is simply this. Why you have untold amounts of money, you've achieved so much in your career, why are you still doing 400 shows a year? What's going on here? What is happening in your psyche that you are pushing yourself to do this? And at first, he gave the kind of canned answer that I'm sure a guy of his stature needs to give to protect himself. But Copperfield is a really extraordinary guy, and he's a really thoughtful guy, and I kind of kept pressing him on it. And there was just at one point he got really reflective and he opened up. And he told me what it was that drives him and pushes him. And you'll read about that too. And I was really proud of that answer. I couldn't believe I pressed to get past the surface level stuff and really do it.
So jealous. So jealous. What's your writing process? Do you set aside X hours a day? Do you say I've got to do 2,000 words a day, or do you just write when you feel? Tell us about your process.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I wish I had, a daily writing rhythm in my life, because I'd be such a better writer if I wrote every day of my life all the time, like Stephen King and these great writers do. But I'm just pulled in too many directions. Let me tell you a few things that have helped me, and I can't say whether they would help anybody else. I don't have any kind of daily writing quota, and I didn't write to any deadline. I picked a deadline with my agent that was very safe, so I never was like writing furiously to get to the deadline. I took it seriously from the start, and I turned it in early, actually. But the first thing I did was I overwrote by about 40%. I knew that there would be things that were inside baseball, that there were just too in the weeds for people.
Right.
And I knew that I would be the last one to be able to decide what really was inside baseball. So I left that to my editors at Workman Publishing. And sure enough, as always happens, sometimes the things I was like, I'm going to write this, but I'm pretty sure that only a magician would care. And I got feedback like, no, this is really good. I think this is fascinating. And there were other times when I was so sure I was going to be fascinating about the neuroscience of magic and some of the studies that have been done. And, I got feedback like, hey, I'm sure this is very helpful if you're designing a magic show, but nobody's going to care about this. And I got to feel really good. I knew we were going to go for 52 chapters, so I submitted, 75 chapters or so. So a lot of it ended up on the cutting room floor. So that's one, overwriting. The other one is I tried to write as close to the situation as possible. So with both Teller and Copperfield, as an example we talked about, I wrote those pieces on the days immediately following my shadowing of those guys.
So it was all fresh.
I recorded them so I could go back and pull quotes, but I did not okay, I got the interviews, I'll do this in a couple of weeks. I wanted to do it right then and there when their words were spinning in my head.
Sure.
And then the last part of it is I always tried to think in narrative terms. So almost all the chapters in the book start by putting you right in the middle of the action. So they all start with a story. They all start with something happening, and then they pull back and zoom out, and we examine a topic.
I have a question. Who owns the 40% that was rejected? Do Workman own it, or you?
I do.
So what are you going to do with it, man?
First of all, I'm a big believer. Anybody who knows me knows I'm a big believer in editing down. So I would say to you that I submitted 75 chapters, but I don't contend that those 15 chapters that were cut are my best writing. In fact, I think probably some of them should stay on the cutting room floor. What I will tell you is that there's a piece of writing in those 15 cut essays that is basically my manifesto, my roadmap to magical fluency. And what we determined very early on is wow, you're so in the weeds here. This is really fascinating, but this is way too much detail for a layperson. But it's basically my how-to guide on how I think we should critically watch a magic show. How a
Right.
magician in particular can go to any magic show, close up or stage, and the things that they shouldn't be trapped by, whether it's difficult, whether they could see themselves doing it, whether it's practical, whether it fooled them, and instead follow the things that are really important. What's the aim of this performance? What's this performer's goal? Do they achieve it? Why have they made the decisions that they make? What character decisions have they made? All these questions that, look, some of us know, but most of us clearly don't know. And I think that someday, somehow, there's a booklet or essay or book in those chapters that could be, fleshed out, let's say.
So, as part of the promotion for the book, you're also doing a podcast. So I've got competition in the magic podcast scene from my own boss. I'm not happy about it, but tell me about it.
Yeah, well, actually, I have listened for different things when you do the podcast because I am learning, and I listen to some podcasts, but not like some people that's their life is listening to podcasts. But yes, I have a podcast, How Magicians Think, and it's coming out through Audio Up, which is a really great podcasting company that hosts really big podcasters and great topics in a variety of ways. And it's a limited podcast series, so we're going to do 12 and just sort of see how it feels for both of us. But we basically are bringing 12 of the chapters to life.
Okay.
So I do a whole chapter on who is the greatest living magician, and it just might be Juan Tamariz, and so I interview Juan Tamariz. I do a whole chapter on the science and magic, and I get Richard Wiseman and lots of scientific magicians, and we all have a great discussion about that. We talk about the best magic movies, and I get Larry Fong and several others to weigh in on magic and movies.
Cool.
And yeah, so it's been really fun to have these conversations, and I'm actually recording the very last of the intros today, and then it'll all go to post, and they'll edit it up, and it comes out October 8th, and I hope all of you friends of the Insider will listen in. It's like public friendly, but I think even more geared toward magic fans and magicians and so on.
Well, if you're a good boy, I'll put a link to it on the Insiders page. Yeah, and there's a book tour. When does that start? How many cities are you going to? And what can people expect if they come out to see you?
Yeah, and I think I can speak unofficially and just say that I'll be coming to your neck of the woods as well. I think that when I'm over for the session in January, provided things are significantly better and improved, and I hope they will be with the pandemic, I think I'll be doing a couple book events in London area. So,
how exciting.
Yeah. So anyway, the book tour is 35 cities, and they are adding a few here and there as well. And so I'm coming to most major markets in the United States, and I'll be doing local media, podcasts, television, radio, newspapers. And then each evening I'm doing an appearance. So it'll be at universities, at independent bookstores, at town halls, these kinds of places. I'm going to open with a 25-minute show with some of my favorite pieces. And then I'm interviewed. And then I do Q&A all on the book.
So this is like a proper big book then, Josh,
This is like a scary, proper book and tour. Like really... And I mean, I've released other books, but they've been how-to guides to magic. This is a proper... Yeah, this is really daunting and exciting.
That's super exciting. We're out of time, Joshua J. But as you know, we always end the show with 4 quick-fire questions, and they're always the same, but you've already answered them.
So what do we do?
We're going to do a new segment called 4 New Questions for Josh.
Oh, I love 4 new questions for Josh. I'm sure it'll be very meaningful when it's not me doing the new segment.
Well, it may only run for 1 episode. Okay. We'll see how it goes. And I didn't put this in the Google Doc, so you don't even know what the questions are. Number 1, favourite author?
Norman MacLean, A River Runs Through It.
Quick, I like that. Favourite Pixar movie?
Ratatouille, and I can tell you why. You don't want to know why.
It's quick fire questions, Josh, but as you own the company, you're allowed to break the rules.
I get the same rules as everybody else. In one sentence, because I think it's one of the only Pixar films that isn't centered around violence or physical dominance of other people. It's truly about a passion for cooking.
Favorite place to get bagels in New York?
Brooklyn Bagel Company.
Who would you rather fight? One massive Marlowe or 100 tiny Vernons?
I think 100 tiny Vernons, because I consider myself more agile than sort of brute strength, and so I think I'd be able to dive and dash more than like, the power of a very powerful Marlowe might just squash me like a bug.
Joshua J, thank you so much for taking
Dave.
time out of such a hectic schedule to speak to us. I really do appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. I'm very excited for you and for everybody else to get this book.
Me too. Bye now.